Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builders Supply, and this video is to bring you a closer look at the Yale number 8805FL. This is with an E1R, an AU with a CN, and a 626 finish. So let's dissect that part number a little bit. It's an 8805, it's an 05 function. We'll talk about the function. It's an 88 series mortise lock in an 05 function. The FL is just part of the part number. The AU is the lever trim, and the CN is the escutcheon trim. The E1R stands for the para, which stands for Paracentric, which is a reference to the keyway that you'll have. It's a E1R or a para keyway in a 626 finish. The 05 happens to be a storeroom function. Storeroom is always locked on the outside. You always need the key to get in. From the inside, you can always exit at all times. The outside lever is rigid, the inside lever is always active. So let's start this video with a visual tour of what is in the box. So of course, the business end of the lock is going to be the cassette. This is referred to as a cassette. If you really use your imagination and think back to the 70s and 80s, this is a cassette. That's what this is. Okay. We're going to take a look at that mortise body real quick. Let's pull that cover off. And the reason I want to investigate the interior of this lock body is because, well, I was getting an intermittent behavior out of our deadlocking latch. You may have noticed that I felt like I was getting intermittent behavior out of it. Now I'm not. I'm going to take it apart just anyway to look at it, because it was not working right before I pause this video. I'm going to remove the 5 screws from the case, so if you'll just bear with me. Let's actually do this. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to investigate that lock body. And I've added a camera here so we can kind of look at it together. I'm going to remove the screws. I've already have 3 of them removed. 1, 2, 3. Removing the cover from a lock case is not to be feared. It is to be done with respect, however. A storeroom function is relatively few moving parts, so there's less to be scared of when you're doing it. But when I pull the cover off, I kind of like to pull it off from the center as much as possible rather than tipping it off, because I will dislodge parts most certainly. I believe there's probably a decal holding this one together, so I'm going to score the decal. Definitely. And as soon as I lift it off, I can immediately sense whether or not something's moved or jumped, and nothing has. As I had said earlier, there's really not a lot of moving parts here in this lock case. There just aren't, because it's a storeroom function. The bottom line is, and I'm going to investigate this for a moment, just looking at this myself. To try to figure out why it was not working. Okay. You know, the only thing that I can figure is, so what's happening here is you have this guard. There's a spring here that forces the guard to come down every time that you move the deadlocking tab here. Okay, so that must have been hung up It must have just been momentarily hung up, overwhelming the power of the small spring that's right at the tip of my finger. The reason we needed to take it apart is, well, this is going to a client. Okay, we don't. The client can't get a storeroom lock that's not guarded, that is not operating correctly, for a number of reasons. First, it'd be very easy to Lloyd the lock, to tamper with the latch bolt and get in. Second, if he's putting it onto a fire door, or if she is, you don't have a fire-rated lock at that point. So making sure of what's happening before you send it, of course, is crucial. Putting it back together is just a matter of getting all these little bits and bobs and these protrusions to fit through and into the lock case. And as I'm putting it together, I can see the one that's giving me the majority of trouble. And it snapped right in, but it was this little ear right here on this, on the support in the case itself. So that's why I was positioning it so that I was able to get that little ear in first at the tip of my finger. Yeah, okay. So once I got that ear in, the rest of it fell in place. So what I always do is, you know, the cover needs to feel like it's flat. If it feels like it's flat and doesn't rock, it's probably going to work just fine. And what I will always do when I remove a cover is I will always test the operation of the hub to make sure that the latch bolt retracts smoothly, completely, and then extends completely when it's all done. I get the screws mostly secured all the way down, get all the screws put back in place, then I'll kind of work my way from the center outwards. There is no reason to... Do not sink them all down one at a time, because then you lock the cover won't be able to shift into its natural position when you have it one screw prematurely set down. I usually bring them down to the point where the cover will get to the underside of the head of the screws, and then it will shift to a point where it will then rest in its proper location. Okay, do not over tighten the screws. There's simply no reason to do that. Okay, since we have this camera going here, let's just go over the how to reverse the handing situation. So what's... Okay, so I should have pointed it out prior to putting the cover back on, but I can demonstrate it, I suppose, without removing the cover. So with armor front removed, insert a flat blade screwdriver into the cover slot, see picture below, and pull on latch bolt head. Rotate latch bolt head to desired handing. Operate several times to ensure proper function. Pull back on flat blade screwdriver. I have no idea what all that means. With armor front removed, insert a flat blade screwdriver into the cover slot. See picture below. Into the cover slot. Supposed to retract that? I don't see how you are. Okay, well it does. It certainly does slide. There's no doubt about that. Okay, I have no idea what that does. The installation instructions aren't very clear to me, so I'm going to remove that. Not that curiosity gets the best of me, but we need to understand how it works. I don't know what function this, what hand this is now. It's either a right hand or a left hand reverse. The latch bolt is set up either way. The stacking of the hubs on the inside will determine whether it's right hand or left hand reverse. So what I mean by that is, you know, it's clearly a right hand. Okay, so I can go this way, or maybe it's a left hand reverse. We simply don't know just yet what hand it is. Might be a left hand reverse. So So let's put that back down there and pull that cover off. You know, kind of just looking at how it works. Uh-huh. Okay. Well, I suspected as much, that it would work the way that I just thought that it would. Word to the wise, you should always have with you... some wet paper towels, or, you know, a shop rag. Pull that forward. So that instruction's telling us, rotate latch bolt head to desired handing. Pull on the latch bolt head. I don't know what they're talking about. I'm going to refer to the installation instructions quickly. I can tell how to reverse it, but not according to their installation instructions, which are, at least for me, not very clear at all. Okay, I see what they're doing here. Okay. Handing the latch bolt into cover slot. Okay, so I see no way at all to make this work. So the cover slot that they're referring to is more clearly shown in the installation instructions. And admittedly, I did not intend to sidetrack into handing this at this part of the video, but let's go there now. I'm going to put the cover back on so that I can determine exactly what they're talking about. Okay, so I'm going to put a screw in there so I don't lose anything. I'm going to secure that. Then I'm going to get a slotted screwdriver. Now here's the cover slot that they're referring to. Right there. So I don't see what the cover slot does by inserting a flat screwdriver into it. I see. Okay. Yeah, okay. Right, okay. So it does work. It was not obvious to me when I had the cover off. To reverse that latch bolt, you're going to be in this cover slot right here. And when you stick your screwdriver in there and you turn it, you throw that latch bolt out. And if you throw it out far enough, I've kind of got it jammed there where I can then rotate it, snap it all the way around. Okay? So when you hand a mortise lock, there's sometimes, there's always, if you need to rehand a mortise lock, there's always one thing that you have to do and possibly two things that you have to do. Reverse the latch bolt is number one, and then orient the hubs correctly. So what I mean is, this latch bolt right now, as we said earlier, this is going to be for either a right hand or a left hand reverse. If the hand of my door was left hand or right hand reverse, I would need to flip that over. That's number one. Now, the question is, what side is the lock side on this? Well, you can look inside the lock case. Or you can follow the instructions. So changing the hubs, handing the hubs, locate red mark on locking piece, push toggle slide away from square spindle hole, with blade screwdriver push red mark on slide nearest square spindle hole, red mark indicates locked side. So what they're saying is you can take, you're going to need to, now they initially say the armor front has to be off. That's because that slide moves here. You can see that I'm moving the slide. The slide has to be able to move. When you have the armor front off, you slide it away, it said, and then you're going to push a slotted screwdriver against this red side to flip it around to the other side. It does work that way. That much I know. And you just have to kind of work that over. I don't actually care for doing it this way because I don't like to manipulate the lock in that fashion. So I've got it partially turned, and what I'm going to end up having is the red on the opposite side, as seen here, where the red mark was on this side. So this lock was originally a right hand, and I know that because the red mark was on the ingress side, and I know that because of where the latch bolt was. So what I'm doing now is I'm just flipping it back to the way that it was. I don't see that I ordered this as handed for the client. Well, I don't see the handing in the part number. So now the red side is on the same side as this. So this is definitely a right-hand lock. This would be the lock side, because what happens is, just be easiest to show you with the case off, the cover off. Back in the old days, they weren't field reversible like this. Then at some point in the 90s, at least Schlage made it a little bit easier, but I didn't find it any easier myself. I found it more difficult to reverse them because you'd have to pull on that latch bolt so hard. That's why Yale's having you use the tool, because otherwise I couldn't always pull that latch bolt out to flip it over. So what's really great about this is, okay, so we have part of the hardware still attached to the case. Yeah, I'm going to pull that off. The part of the locking hub is still on the back side of the case. So I'm going to pull that off and put it where it goes in the case body itself. Okay. Okay. So now we have this put together so that we can see it. So you'll note that the red side is up. Well, it sticks into the locking hub up here, but the bottom hub down here, that's open. So when you when the lock is in the locked position, meaning when the armor front is on, that's going to, oh, you missed that, sorry. So when the armor front is put on, it's going to force this tab in, allowing that to lock in position. Down here, there is no locking function that's happening on the lower hub, but when I reverse that over, now I'm locking only the hub on the bottom side. That's just simply how it works. Okay, so let's put this back together. We have completely covered how to rehand it. Now, you could also, you could also, if you wanted, and the way that I would end up doing it would be that I would physically disassemble the latch assembly so I could pull all of this out and flip the thing over. But when you're sticking that screwdriver down in there, you're obviously putting pressure on the back side of the latch bolt, forcing it to pop out. My hands are really not strong enough, and plus they're covered in oil, to pull that latch bolt to flip it over. And that's generally what I find to be the problem with those types of latch bolts. I just don't have the hand strength to pull it out when your fingers are covered in oil. So I will very often just remove the lock case because it's simple and straightforward to do it that way. At least it is for me. Some people will pull the lock case off of a Mortise lock and they will find that their curiosity has gotten the better of them and now they have a pile of parts. And then those people are sometimes done. They do not or will not proceed with trying to put Humpty Dumpty back together. Other people will call and say, I got too curious, do you have a parts diagram? And I've sent parts diagram to people, and some people have been able to successfully put them back together. You do not need to remove this lock case at all. I don't encourage you to do so unless you are either very familiar with mortise locks or you're mechanically inclined. But there's nothing in there that you're going to break. It's all very robust what's in there. Let's switch back to the single camera view. Now a little bit of deep dive we just did on how to hand or rehand these locks. You'll notice that it's doing it again. It's doing it again. What in the gospel's going on here? Okay. As soon as I looked at it and did it again, yeah, so I think what's happening is, so the lock right now is upside down. It's not working. Let's turn it flat. It's working. I think what's happening is when it's upside down, initially, there's so much grease that's inside of here that the mechanism that needs to get pushed down, the lever it's basically a lever. Technology from for sure, the 18th century. That spring is not pushing it down. There's not enough tension on that spring to push that lever down to block that. I think it's just temporary because I did admittedly have that upside down. Okay, it works otherwise. Okay. So that's the lock case. So this is a storeroom lock. It's always locked on one side. It's always unlocked. So right now we know that that's red. We know that this is a right hand. If you wanted to change it to a left hand reverse, all you need to do is with the armor front off so that you can slide this gizmo. You need to slide it away from the hub. But when the armor front goes on, it will push this lobe in. Then you can't slide that. But without the armor front, you can slide it. You just need to get here and flip that hub around, get the red on the other side, then you've changed the handing. Okay, so simple and straightforward, right? Okay, now let's move on to the rest of the parts that we have. Okay, moving forward would probably bring us best to the cylinder and then the discussion and the levers. So this is a typical mortise cylinder from Yale. This part number might be an 1109 if you ordered it separately. Yale 1109 or 2153, I think. I think 1109 is a rim cylinder. Yale 1109. Yeah, a Yale 2153 is probably what this is. Actually, no, it's 2153 would be 1.25 inches. This should be 1 1/8 inches. Underside of the head to the back of the cam, even shorter than that. No, it's 1 1/8 inches. That's what it's supposed to be. Okay, 1 1/8 inches. That part number, yeah, 2153 is what it is. So this is a 2153 cylinder in a Para, P-A-R-A, or E1R. Para stands for paracentric. Paracentric is a word used to describe crossing the center line. If you study the broaching in the cylinder plug, and there are images down below showing this. Actually, let's take a closer look at that to demonstrate what we're talking about. Here's the cylinder that we are basically looking at, and I want to demonstrate or describe better what the para or paracentric term means. Look at that broaching there in the plug. There's a much closer view of it. Now imagine in your mind a vertical line going right down the center of the broaching. Paracentric means that these wards, that's what these are called, these wards, cross that center line, giving you this sort of corrugated type of keyway. This is called a paracentric keyway. Early Yale cylinders, when I mean early, I mean, you know, the Civil War era and before, they had a slot here, a very straight, it was completely straight. making it very easy to insert tools into there to manipulate that cylinder. The paracentric nature of the keyway itself works to very much foil picking attempts. Not by everyone, but most certainly by, and there's a point to me going here, but by the casual, certainly. Now here is an image showing highly paracentric keyways. Highly paracentric. Some of these you can't get a tool into without running the risk of overlifting the pins, such as whatever this one is. This security leg, this could be best, or key mark. I don't think it's key mark, but you get the point. Very paracentric. You know, the question becomes is where's even the center line on this? You know, how do you measure the center line? So highly paracentric with wards protruding into it. So that's what paracentric means. Now, since we have the screen view going, let's just look at the rest of the pictures that we have here, because I do have other photos. Here is the part of the Augusta lever. The cylinder we've gone through. A couple of original keys. They will have a direct code, 353516, 353516. Those are the cuts. Your strike and your screw pack and your installation instructions. Now that's the armor front, and that is the piece of equipment that goes onto the edge of the door, edge of the lock actually, and covers it with the edge of the door. We're going to talk more about that in a moment. Additional photographs are here. Your label on the box. Everything included. Lock case or cassette. Discussion trim. That's your CN part of the part number. Being a storeroom lock, there's nothing on the inside. Cylinder on the outside, trim through the door, and that's all. And there's your Augusta levers. Okay, now let's switch back to the camera view. Now to finish up what we're talking about on the cylinder, that's got a Yale cam on it. You're going to need Mortise locks require cams. Other things require cams. The cam is the item that stands between the actual cylinder itself and the key doing its job, but the key doesn't act directly on the locking mechanism itself. So let me back up. A pin tumbler cylinder was a paradigm shift in the evolution of lock development in the 19th century, because before pin tumbler cylinders, the key would actually act on the bolt itself. Think of a bit key or a barrel key, also known in standard terminology as a skeleton key. So while skeleton key isn't the proper term, everyone knows what that's meant, what is meant by that. When you put that skeleton key in the lock, part of that skeleton key, what is called the bit, would actually touch the lock, the bolt itself. The cam is what touches the bolt. The key never does that. Every lock manufacturer requires a specific cam for their locks. Can you stick a Yale cylinder like this into a Schlage or a Corbin or a Sargent or Arrow or Falcon or Best or Stanley or 100 other people? Yeah, you can thread it in, because that's 1 in 5/32 diameter, 32 threads per inch. But the cam is going to prevent it from working correctly. It might work a little. It might work not at all. It might work halfway, but it's not going to work completely. So if you're going to use a Yale cylinder in a Schlage lock, you're going to need to have a Schlage cam on the back of here, and that's all possible. So you have to have this type of Yale, this type of cam to work on that Yale 8800 series. And it has everything to do with the bird's mouth sort of dimensional properties of what it is that you're moving with the cam. Everything that you're moving inside of there. It's going to include a wave washer. If you use your imagination, you can see why we would call it a wave washer. This allows you to get that cylinder installed into the escutcheon or the rosette, pardon me, or the cylinder collar, and you'll be able to get that to flatten down so that your cylinder is tight on the face of the door, in the sense that it's not completely tightened down like a nut would be. It will stay under that, you know, tension from the wave washer. A couple of original keys. This is a Yale, classic Yale bow. This is that round bow about the size of a nickel, a little bit larger. This is a Para keyway, or an E1R. You know, now the Para is actually a simplex keyway, and a simplex keyway means that it does not participate in a multiplex environment. It's a fancy way of saying is that there is no other key blank from Yale that will enter this keyway. It's a simplex keyway. You can have keyways, and Yale has, as far as I'm concerned, countless keyways, even though it's a finite number of keyways that behave or that exist within a multiplex structure. So a multiplex structure could be simply, and this is a, you know, there could be 9 different keyways. Let's just say that there are 2. This keyway and this keyway. This A and B. A will not, the A key blank will not enter the broaching of the B plugs. The B key blank will not enter the broaching of the A plugs, meaning an A, if this is A, you can't stick a B blank in there. But on top of that, you could have an AB blank that will enter both of those, and that would be an all-section key blank. That's a multiplex environment. Specifically, the E1R or the Para is simplex. It's designed to be standalone, doesn't participate in anything. No other key blanks will enter it. It is not compatible with other keyways as well. There are times when you want that, and there are times when you can't have that. The times when you want that is when you want to have doors that have cylinders that no other keys can pass other than a Para keyway or an E1R. An actual application of that would be a hospital, where you've got countless doors, hundreds of doors, floors. On each of these floors are narcotics closets. You'll have change keys, master keys, selective master keys, grandmaster keys, great grandmaster keys. But sometimes they'll stick that narcotics locker on a simplex keyway, keeping it not only keyed outside of that multi-level structure, level 3, 4, or 5 structure, but keeping it to where there's physically no compatibility with other keyways because it doesn't exist within the multiplex structure that the rest of the hospital would be. So that's when you would want it. When you don't want it is when you have a system, would be when you have a demand for differs or change key quantities or just differently cut keys, okay, that exceeds the quantity available. So what I mean to say is this, without getting into the math behind it, even though the math behind it is not at all remotely difficult, a 6-pin cylinder, that is what we'd have as a 2-step sort of construction, a 2-step platform like this Yale key, you could have 4,096 potential theoretical different change keys. So you could have 4,096 different cut keys, theoretically. It's actually not that in reality because of the rules that apply to keying. That's the quantity of different change keys. It can also be referred to as differs because the way I've read it is if you have this Yale lock and this Yale lock, they're the same Yale lock. How do they differ when you've ordered them as keyed differently? The only way they differ is that they're keyed differently. The cuts on the key are different, so that's the differ. So the differs would be 4,096. Now, if you had a project, so 4,096, let's just leave it at a theoretical number. If you had a project that required 6,000 different keys, which do exist easily, and I've been in class with people that have been involved with jobs of 40,000 keys. You could take all of your bidding numbers on that A keyway and cut all your keys and get to, you know, let's say 3,000 because you need 6,000. Then take your same bidding numbers and cut them on the B keyway. Then you have the same key numbers. You know, the first in the A and the first in the B are the same cuts, but the keys won't work each other's locks. You can cut all those blanks on that all section blank and then achieve 6,000 changes when only a single keyway would give you theoretically just over 4,000. So that's the other reason for a multiplex environment, and I think the most common as well. But the Para is specifically not a multiplex environment. There are times when you do want that and times when you don't. We've explained both. So let's do this. Now let's look at the trim. This would be the, well, let's go look at the AU, the Augusta. So this is the Augusta part of the lock. We're going to get these, well, we'd leave that spindle put together. This is what's called a swivel spindle. There's an Allen wrench down here. If I were to unscrew that, they do not include an Allen wrench with the hardware. Now we'll get that trim turned off so we can just simply take a closer look at the hardware. An 1/8 of an inch is the size of that Allen wrench. So this is what's called a swivel spindle. There are straight spindles, split spindles, and swivel spindles. This is a swivel spindle. You can see why that's the case. Now, why would you need a swivel spindle? Well, if you think about how those hubs have to behave that govern the lock, and if you recall, I always test the lock when I put it back together. One side needs to be rigid. One side needs to be rigid, and the other side needs to be, one side needs to be always rigid, the other side needs to be always secure. So if you had a straight spindle, it would always be locked on both sides. But with a swivel spindle, you would absolutely be able to operate the lock independent on each side. There we go. Okay, so we have that slid away. Now when I insert the spindle into here, it will retract on both sides. In fact, that's because the armor front's not on. As soon as I put the armor front on, I lock that outside trim. Now that's always locked. However, from the inside, sorry, it's not turning out to be a very successful demonstration. The inside is always going to be unlocked. Okay, always unlocked, always locked. Okay, always unlocked. That's why you have a swivel spindle, because one side needs to operate independently of the other. I didn't really need to turn that all the way off, but I was engaging the other side, other hub, because I had that tightened down together, and it was trying to, the way I was rotating it was causing it to, you know, not operate correctly. Plus, I was rotating it in the wrong direction because I had the lever in backwards. So, now that I have it put together correctly, always unlocked, always locked, always unlocked, always locked. So that's what a swivel spindle does. Now, a straight spindle would be appropriate for simply those functions that have no need to have independent operation on either side, like a passage or a lock, an institutional lock, where the levers are always going to be rigid regardless. Any sort of function that features a rigid trim is always going to be rigid like that. Okay, so that's your Augusta lever. Let's take a basic dimensional property of the item. Overall width of the Augusta lever is about 5 inch. Overall, from the face of the door, is probably going to be about 2 1/4 inch, something in that range. Okay. The exterior has the fixed roll pin into the spindle. The interior, and this would feed from the outside. This roll pin here is going to stop it at the proper depth. You'll have these slots, or this milling that's been done on the spindle. That needs to be facing where the set screw is, you'll see that there's a little evidence of where the set screw was tightened down into that. So that's got to go right there, right where it was. Okay. Now, back to our escutcheon trim. Let's take a closer look. Now, what the CN is just this escutcheon, this die-cast escutcheon. Okay. This is obviously the exterior. You have your cylinder hole and your trim here. It's also the exterior because of the female through bolts that are there as well. About 8 5/8 overall height. Overall width, about 2 1/8. Projection from the face of the door is about 3/8 of an inch. Interior plate's going to be the same. About 8 5/8, 2 1/8. Okay, about 3/8. We know it's the inside because it has the preparations for the bolts to run through the unit, and then of course your spindle prep, or your trim prep, really. Moving through the visual tour would be the armor front. That gets put right there. When that armor front is on, that lobe can't move, which means you can't move that slider back and forth. Now, if you were to look at a Mortise lock, if you were to look at a catalog from Yale, in fact, in the late 19th century, you're going to find locks that are not of this construction. So the armor front is 8 inch tall, about 1 1/4 inch wide. Okay. You're going to find Mortise locks that have a very thick front here, where all of the preparation for this material is prepped directly in the face of this itself. Okay. Now, rounding out our visual tour of everything, the strike... Oh, I'm sorry, we were talking about the Mortise locks, forgive me. So back in the 19th century, even the early 20th century, your Mortise locks would have been 1/4 inch or so thick a solid material. Through that would be not only the preparations for the hardware to project out, your deadbolt, your latch bolt, your deadlocking guard, your stop works, when required, but also access for the screw that will govern holding the cylinder in. Okay, not so great. The design at some point, late 19th, early 20th century, first quarter of the 20th century, evolved into moving away from that solid, thick component of the Mortise lock itself, making that thinner, then adding what's called an armor front, a thin piece of metal, decorative metal, that covers access to those things that you don't want people to have access to, like the screw that I can turn counterclockwise, unthread your cylinder, stick my finger in there and operate the lock. Okay, so the armor front will allow the latch, the deadlocking guard, your stop works, the deadbolt to project through, but not access to the screws that hold the lock to the door or the screw that governs your Mortise cylinders. So that's what the armor front does. It's an evolution in the design of Mortise locks. If you were to see a Mortise lock from the early 20th century, Chicago, which is where I'm from, is full of them. It is possible that I could develop a tool that would allow me to slowly, inch by inch, unthread that screw so I can get that cylinder off. The armor front protects access to all of that. Okay. Now the strike plate is the next thing we need to look at. This is a 4 7/8 strike. They call it an ASA or an ANSI strike. It's those terms ASA and ANSI just refer to the fact that it is a standardized type of strike. Standardized. This is, as I said earlier, 4 7/8 tall. The overall width of the strike, about 1 7/8 inches or so. That's not how strikes are measured, however. Strikes are measured from the center line of the hole to the edge of the lip. This is about 1 1/4 inches. Okay, that's how strikes are measured. Center of the hole to the edge of the lip. That's the important dimension. 1 1/4 is standard. It's common. 1 3/16, 1 5/16, 1 1/4. It's all good. That's like the Swiss Army knife size of strike lip lengths, and that's what that's called, the lip length. It could easily be wrong for your application. The important part is that you're mindful that it's 1.25" and that you determine if this is the correct strike for your application. Okay? Now, where would it be too long? Well, a pair of hollow metal doors, reverse bevel active, flat astragal applied to the pull face of the active door. You need a 7/8 lip length for that. That flat astragal is going to close against the face of the inactive door. That lip is going to prevent that from happening. You need a 7/8 lip length. 7/8 is 1/2 inch and 3/4, assuming 1.75" door thickness. Where is 1.25" too short? Well, lots of ways. The common example that comes to mind is a residential application where they have brick mold applied on the exterior of a door that swings out. That lip, the latch bolt is going to hit that brick mold before it hits the strike because the lip is just too short. You're going to want to make that longer, maybe 1.75", maybe 2 inch, whatever the dimension is. You'll need to lengthen that lip in order for that to get out further. So the point of that is be mindful. It's 1.25". That will probably work, but it's possible that it won't. Now, what I don't like about this is that it's completely cut out and cut open. This one strike will work as a standard strike for all of the Yale mortise locks. I don't like that because I don't need all these holes. I need a hole for my latch bolt only for a storeroom lock. For a lock that incorporates a deadbolt, I need that as well. Okay? I never need a hole for my guard, my deadlocking tab. Okay, so obviously this is going to have to work like that so that the tab is always depressed. Okay? So that's clearly how that's going to work. Now, I don't like it because the strike could be better if it had individual holes per the function. But what happens then is now you've got a list of strikes per function times 2 for left hand and right hand. So that's why they go with this long cutout, because it will work regardless. What's disadvantageous, however, is in a little deep dive on mortise locks with deadbolts. When you a door with weather stripping, when you take a mortise lock equipped door that has a deadbolt, there's weather stripping, you close the door. The door is going to come closed, it's going to latch. Okay? What happens is the door closes, it latches, and then the door relaxes. It moves out a little bit. You then go to throw the deadbolt. If the deadbolt hole and the latch hole are literally the same center line, assuming they were the same width, which they're not, that deadbolt would actually not throw. So in high quality manufacturers, and Yale is one, but you'll see people who specialize in hardware like this, that deadbolt prep is offset because the door has relaxed a little bit and you want to throw that deadbolt so that it's secure. So that's the other reason I don't like this. I understand why they do it this way, because otherwise inventory would become brutal. Then every lock is handed, guaranteed. All of the engineering that went into making this reversible is no longer that important because you still have a strike. Now, one thing that I love about this lock is it is, I mean, that's it. You get a couple of collars. The word is escaping me what those are properly called. We'll figure it out. And a couple of through bolts. Those spacer or collars, they're just meant to go underneath the lever trim as it sits into the escutcheon. So it won't go like this. You're going to use that collar to go right there. It's just an anti-friction sort of collar, you know, spacer. Okay, now I have to look up the word because it's escaping me. That page has the sectional trim on it. Rose adapter is what they call it. A rose adapter. Yeah, rose adapter. No. Stop. It's called a plastic bushing. It's just simply called a plastic bushing. The rose adapter is a different part for sectional trim. This would be a plastic bushing. So that's all it is. Plastic bushing. Okay. So 2 screws to go from the inside escutcheon to the exterior escutcheon. Then all you need are 4 screws. 2 to hold the lock case on into the edge of the door, here and here. 2 screws, same screw actually, for the strike. And then those two tiny screws right here, they're for the armor front, is all that those are for. They're going to hold the armor front into this tapped hole here and here through those small countersunk holes. Okay, so you have a total of 8 screws and 2 plastic bushings. Installation is easy, super easy. So, you know, out of everything that we've talked about, I wish the strike was handed, you know. I can understand why they don't, but other than that, it's a glorious strike, glorious lock. Let's switch to the screen view and go over all the supporting documentation. Here is the item that we are looking at. Supporting documentation linked to down below. First of all will be the template. This is going to be the wood door template that's seen here. Pardon me, this is the metal door template. It's going to show us what the preparation needs to look like in a hollow metal door, or even aluminum door for that matter. Would not be impossible to see that on an aluminum door. 8-inch tall body prep, plate prep, 1.25 inch wide, 4 1/8 inch depth to accommodate the lock body itself. It's showing a reinforcement that would occur here on the inner cavity of the door. This is to represent a couple of guides or spacers or tangs that will hold the lock cassette in the body. So that it doesn't flop around on the inside of the door itself. So it keeps the body where it needs to be. So you're not reliant on the you know, on the cylinder to hold it in place. And this does indeed show us our pocket preparation along with the strike. Wood door as well. The templates are, you know, they're different for each. No doubt about that. Body depth, pocket is to be, well, 4 1/8 inch deep. And the width of the pocket is 1 1/16, 6 5/8 overall. So what you end up doing is this sort of prep right here, the 6 5/8, 1 1/16, and that's going to literally represent all of this. And you're going to go 4 1/8 inch deep with that. Then over that, you're going to do 8 inch by 1.25 inch, and I think that faceplate depth is, well, it's 15/64. It's right here. Okay. 2 3/4 back set. Strike prep as well. Now be mindful. Let's talk, well, you know what? We're going to talk about the function holes right now, so let's talk about function holes. There's another document down below called function hole preparation. I just said the term back set, and it's referred to here as well, back set. Now, when you're drilling holes, function holes for mortise locks, for lever through holes, for door viewers, I wouldn't call it a function hole, but a door viewer, exit device trim, you have to be super mindful in terms of what is the back set and where you're referring to. The back set is the dimension from the edge of the door to the center of the hole that you're drilling. And what I'm doing here is drawing 4 different relatively common edge details. Square edge door, beveled edge door, radiused edge door, rabbited edge door. Where do you measure the back set from? Well, from the edge of the door is what we said. If you measure 2 3/4 here back, you measure 2 3/4 here back, you're going to be really good. You try that trick on a beveled edge door and you're not going to be really good. Because doors, the back set is defined from the center of the thickness. Okay? That's where back set is defined. So, that's the actual definition of back set, from the center of the thickness. That's advantageous because now we don't really care if you have an 1 3/4 thick door or if you have a 6 3/4, you see my point, 1 3/8, 2 1/4, 1 3/4, 3 inch, whatever the thickness, it doesn't matter because we're always referencing to the center of the thickness. The bevel, if we measured, I'm sorry, just awful, from here to here, that dimension from here to here and here is 1/8 inch in 2, and they refer to that on our template, 1/8 in 2, which means that for every 2 inches in thickness, that dimension is 1/8 of an inch. So you're going to be just slight on 1/8 of an inch, obviously, with an 1 3/4 thick door. So be mindful. That's how that is defined. So the nice thing about, the way it's defined, of course, is, it doesn't matter the thickness of the door. It's always going to be referenced from the center line of the thickness. Now, 2 3/4 back set. And what we're seeing here is each side of the door. It looks awfully complicated, but when you understand the function, then you automatically understand what you need to drill. So for a storeroom lock, you've got a cylinder on one side, so you'll have a B hole, and you're going to have trim, so you're going to have the A and the E holes through the door, because it's a storeroom function, where the B would be on the secure side only. This lock, if you recall, was set up as a right hand, so on the outside, we're going to have a B halfway through the door, A and E through the door. The inside of your right hand is going to have the E and the A and the E. Okay, so it's very simple. Now, on page 2, it tells you what to drill. Let's test our knowledge. And if you also recall, we have an 8805. So we know on the outside we're going to need A, B, and E. I'm sorry, yeah, A, B, and E. And on the inside we'll need A and E, exactly what we said. And as we continue to look through here, we're going to get better information, or additional information. The diameter. A hole, forgive me, the diameter of the hole that is called A is 1 1/8, regardless of the door material. The hole that's called B is 1 1/4, and the hole that's called E is 5/16. Okay? Defines what it's used for. Super simple. The bottom line is this. As long as you get that 2 3/4 correct on both sides of the door, meaning you're mindful if you have a beveled edge door to not measure 2 3/4 from here and 2 3/4 from here, because those holes are not going to line up. If you get those aligned and your vertical height is accurate, you are in great shape. I use, just a steel rule is what works. Locate your center line of your lock. Strike, using something that is easily replaced. Some people will use a scribe. You have to be really confident in your dimensions to use a scribe because you're going to scratch the door. I would determine my vertical center line. Then I would get my I would determine my height, my horizontal center line, then my vertical center line of my back set, and then I would reference all my holes from the center line of the lock. And you can determine all hole locations based on the center line of the lock that's there. So very simple and straightforward. Moving to the next document, there is the installation instructions, which we've kind of already gone over. And let's continue with that now. In the spirit of this being an easy lock to deal with, you need an 1/8 of an inch Allen wrench, which we said earlier, and then a number 2 Phillips. So it can't get any easier, really, than that. Now, as we push on, we're talking about marking and drilling your hole, which we've gone over. The size of the holes, what holes you're supposed to drill, the handing of the lock. We've covered all of that. Prepping the door for your hardware, I will leave that up to you. If you have any questions about how to prep your door once you have the order from us, I will absolutely walk you through the steps. Lock body goes in first. I like to leave those screws a little loose. It helps me with getting my cylinder manipulated in, and I'll throw that deadbolt out and use it as a handle so I can get my threaded cylinder to the tapped holes in the lock case a little bit easier. We are dealing with we're dealing with escutcheon trim, not sectional trim, so we're over here. Again, really simple and straightforward. Actually, I made a mistake. I made a glaring mistake. We do not have A, B, and E holes on this lock. at all. In fact, this is the wrong document. This is sectional. Okay, I was going on and on about sectional trim, not realizing we're dealing with a discussion trim. So you're going to have A through the door, B on the outside only, which would be over here, and then G will go through the door. Forgive me, I'm sorry. I was not paying attention well enough. Same concept as we go through here. This is the document that's linked to down below. Installation instructions were over here, so your trim, and actually this is a little bit nicer to contend with when it is escutcheon trim, because you do have the ability to be a little looser with where these holes are, even though that's not encouraged. Plus the size of the plate covers other holes that may not need to be there. Maybe you've drilled the cylinder hole on the wrong side of the door. Well, technically it's not the end of the world, because your escutcheon trim will cover it. Okay. Prepare knob or lever, not including SL trim. So really all they're saying is remove, so this is your exterior lever, if you recall we went over it, and take your swivel spindle and make it a half of a turn gap. Tighten it down, back it off a half a turn. Make sure that the milling that's in the side of the spindle is where the set screw will be. Push that through the exterior. You know, with your plastic bushing right through. Bring in your interior lever trim and its plastic bushing, and then secure the set screw. It's the same as for sectional trim, and this time I'm sure it is. Plastic bushing, push this through from the secure side, set screw into the interior half of the swivel spindle in the groove that's there. Armor front goes on. Your strike plate, if you've not already put it on, and the rest of these are different functions, so I'm sliding past them. Strike plate goes on at the very end. I would put that on first myself. This lock does not have a dust box included with it, as it is going to a... I know that this is going to a project with a welded, it doesn't matter that it's welded, but a masonry style frame that has an integrated mortar box. The strike box would not fit even if it was ordered in that type of frame. Your two screws, and these screws, by the way, for the strike and for the lock body, they're a combination wood machine thread that will work regardless. And then, of course, your instructions also have full-size templates, which are included in the box for all the different functions. Next up would be the product catalog. Let's look at that now. Okay, so here we are with the product brochure, and we'll do a scan here and just touch on the highlights. The 8800 series, I mean, this is a 50-page catalog. We're going to take mercy in terms of the length of this video. The most important thing when it comes to these types of pieces of hardware is always the how to order. And that gives you the structure or the rubric by which to, you know, understand how you're ordering it and preventing you from forgetting some component. Benefits and features we'll touch on. Let's just scroll through it. Nice overview. What I like about the Yale lock is that it goes together really easy. And a lot of times you won't have an opportunity to sell Mortise locks or to install them because they're a lot of money up front. What people don't initially appreciate is the fact that they're known to last a century or longer. There are Mortise locks easily available online that have been in service for 150 years. And, you know, if you are looking for a period correct or antique look, Mortise locks are incredibly robust mechanisms. One thing that makes them so is the size of the hardware and specifically how large all of the internal components are. There aren't tiny little items inside these Mortise locks. They're large, they're robust. They're meant to last millions of cycles and decades of use. That's the advantage of Mortise locks. The only disadvantage of a Mortise lock is that you're removing a lot of the door. Okay? There are other locks that other people make, including Yale, called unit locks, as robust as a mortise lock, but you're removing less of the door. That's a separate but parallel conversation. The unit lock in the 1940s and 50s, those were the absolute standard in terms of heavy-duty locks. Even in residential applications, Yale's sister company, P.F. Corbin, well, today Corbin Russwin, made a lot of unit locks. And I understand correctly that the Empire State Building, built in the late 20s, which was supplied by Corbin, was all unit locks. In fact, with their master ring cylinder, I believe. Heavy-duty trim, resistance against damage and vandalism. It's a grade 1 lock, which means it's been tested to 1,000,000 cycles. Now, it doesn't fail at 1,000,000 in one cycle. It's just been tested to 1,000,000, and they pulled the plug on the test because there is no category beyond 1,000,000 cycles. There's nothing above a grade 1 lock. And I wish there was. I wish there was a grade, something for 10,000,000 cycles, because I think a lot of hardware would certainly pass that sort of cycle test. Available in a variety of trims and finishes. UL and UL 10C listed for up to 3-hour fire doors, naturally. A 10-year mechanical warranty. That's nothing to shake a stick at. Dimensional properties, we won't go over all of them, but you can review that. How to order. This is really, the stock and trade of putting together an order correctly. There's your part number, the proper way to put it together. And they even refer to what pages that you'll need to go to in order to structure a proper part number. I would encourage that you use this guide, because it will allow you to convey exactly what your intent is. And if you're not sure, reach out to us. We're happy to help you put that together, because it is not simple and straightforward to someone who's not spent years, staring at mortise lock catalogs. Finishes. What's nice about the finishes available today compared to the 1990s is that there's a bit of a renaissance that's happening, where we had 6 choices, satin brass, polished brass, satin chrome, polished chrome, oil rubbed bronze, satin bronze. That was it. Now, today, 609 probably would have been available. Polished brass, satin brass, antique brass, polished bronze, satin bronze, powder-coated dark bronze equivalent, blackened satin bronze, polished nickel, satin nickel, 620 is an antique nickel, polished chrome, satin chrome, polished stainless, satin stainless, black powder-coated, black painted. That will be a more matte finish with a smoother texture. Black suede powder coat is, I wouldn't call it matte, a small amount of gloss, but it has a texture to it. That's why they use the word suede, and white as well. You would not have gotten these colors 30 years ago. Bit of a renaissance. So we can see our rose trims, or what we call sectional trims. This would be an AR lever with a CO rose. You would call it ARR. So an AR lever with a CO rose. CO rose, CO rose. Okay, AU lever, CR lever. Toss those onto escutcheons. This lock obviously is the AU with the CN escutcheon. This is the lock we're doing. Okay, additional levers, additional rows, additional lever options, additional trim, sectional trim, escutcheon trim. Additional levers, sectional trim, escutcheon trim, and so on. Okay. Now, they have a whole mess of decorative trim under their reflections and other designs as well. When I say renaissance, truly a renaissance. 30 years ago, you would have gotten the AU, the CR for sure. The AR is a classic lever design. Sargent always had. There's a project that I was always involved in that had all this style Sargent lever. 30 years ago, you would have gotten that stuff with the escutcheons, but now, my goodness, you've got a couple of dozen options. And if you can't find something here, well, let's back up. If you can't find something here, there is a marketing directive from Assa Abloy, Yale's mother company, that says, hey, listen, you want us to custom make you something? Sketch it out and send it to us. We'll be happy to take a look at it. So if you can't find something you like, maybe they can make it for you. A variety of rows options as well. You're not stuck to just the standard 2 and 11/16 diameter rows. A couple of escutcheons. And of course, our ball knob, which they call the Copenhagen. That's been around forever and a day. Now your functions, I won't go through them except to point out to you that we're dealing with the 8805 storeroom. This is what's called the operational description. It is meant to be a very clear-cut, simple, and straightforward, plain language description telling you how this thing is going to behave. An operational description is a term also applied to electrical circuits when it comes to low voltage electrified hardware within the builder's hardware industry. You want to use your operational description to convey to somebody what needs to happen and how it happens. And that's what the storeroom is. For use on storeroom, latch bolt retracted by key outside, knob lever inside. Outside lever is always rigid, inside lever is always active. It has a deadlocking latch bolt, which is where we were kind of stumbling initially to make sure that that little guard was working for us. Lots of pages of functions. We'll just scroll through them. Now, speaking of functions, as I'm saying, there are lots of functions. There is a substantially greater quantity of functions available in a mortise lock platform compared to a cylindrical lock platform because you've got that giant lock case to deal with. They can do a lot more things in a mortise lock than you can a cylindrical lock because you have additional real estate. You will find functions in mortise locks that will not convert to cylindrical lock. Now, what's important is the F number. F22, F20, F06. You very likely might see a specification that has the ANSI number. That's the F number, which means if you have a part number from Sargent and it's an F06, you could go to the Yale book and do a find function for F06 and find that equivalent function. That means it's exactly equal. Okay. Electric functions, you can do a request to exit switch, which means when you rotate that inside lever, it will open or close a circuit via a micro switch with a form C, which is a single pole double throw switch. You'll have a common leg and then a normally open or a normally closed. Well, you'll have normally open and normally closed, but you only wire one of those with the common. So if you wanted to have a lever with a REX switch, a request to exit, and you wanted a light to go on when someone went out, you could easily do that. LBM is latch bolt monitor. If you want to make sure someone's not tampering or loiding the latch bolt, you would do that with an LBM. Deadbolt monitor, you get the concept. You want to make sure someone's not playing with that deadbolt. You can report back the status. ITS is interesting because it gives you a suite of security functions monitoring the lock. Electrolinks is when you have an electrified lock. You can have Electrolinks connectors, which will make it plug and play, so to speak. When it comes to the wiring, you're not going to be stripping wires and wire nuts. Mortise lock functions, when they're electrified, I'll scroll through those. Cylinder options, just suffice it to say that you can toss any type of mortise cylinder into this. Conventional, small format, large format, high security, whatever UL 437 can be thrown into this as well. This is their high security cylinder platform here. That's a different conversation, but really cool the way that that's accomplished. More about cylinders. This is their key mark, which is a restricted keyway. Cylinder collars, accessories, items that generally go along with mortise locks are listed here as well. Guide in terms of what length of cylinder that you might need depending on the door thickness that you're dealing with and the collar that you might be using. More of those tables are here. I had talked at length about the strike plate. This is how you go about specifying what you need. Okay. I had talked about the 7/8 when you have a pair of doors or maybe a 2-inch. They can do flat lip strikes. Specify that if you want a flat lip strike. You wouldn't normally, but you would if you have an application that would call for a flat lip strike. Maybe a wall that couldn't tolerate a lip or that double door I had talked about earlier. Open back strike, that would be used when you have a pair of doors. You might have a surface vertical rod exit device on, pardon me, you might have manual, you might have, let's start over. You might have automatic flush bolts on the inactive and you don't have a coordinator. So if that inactive door closes first, the open back strike will permit your lock to come and close behind it in the event that the active door is in the closed position and bolted position. Well, it'll be bolted when the active door closes, so that would allow that to function correctly. Blank should you need that for some reason. Occupancy indicators. It's 2020 now, and occupancy indicators have been very popular the last so many years, 5 years or so, where manufacturers really provide the options of occupancy indicators on both sides of the door. In fact, I've done a project for a client where it was a dentist's office, and they literally wanted an occupancy indicator on the inside of the restroom as well, so as to visually indicate to the user whether or not that door was still in the secured position or latched position. Even though emergency egress was possible on the function of lock that they had. It wasn't required to make the lock work right. It was just, you know, a tip-off to the person in their bathroom. Rabbited door kits. We had touched on what a rabbited door is earlier, but you can install these onto rabbited kits with these extra pieces that you would need, these fillers. Okay. Thumb turn, emergency key if you have a lock that requires that, like a privacy. It's very important to hand the door correctly. You want to order the lock handed correctly, but should you not, you can reverse it. However, you always specify the handing of the door like we did in the how to order section. A couple of exploded views. That's right out of the installation instructions. ADA compliant, grade 1 compliant. This will work on a square or a beveled edge door. You can order them on special order basis for almost any door thickness. Simply specify. The screws will get longer, the spindles may get longer, the cylinders, the thumb turns might get longer or shorter. Is available in a lead-lined for lead-lined applications. Knurled designs as well. There are stairwell applications mandatory by code that you have knurled levers or knurled trim. I'm sure it would be a lever. UL listed, 10-year mechanical warranty. Mortise lock, electrified locks have a 2-year warranty. Windstorm rated as well. You want to put this Yale lock, these Yale locks onto windstorm rated doors? You sure can. Now, let's wrap up this video on camera. But before we do that, actually, let's back up. Let's go back to the page that we were on. Link here to the manufacturer's page is where you can view not only all of the Yale products that we sell by means of this horizontal navigation, but also a link to the manufacturer's website, as well as a link to the full product catalog and very old prior catalogs. If you want to see what Yale was making in 1905, well, there's your catalog. Lots of catalogs between 1880 and 1937. So really interesting. You know, 14, 15 years after the Civil War to right before World War II. Cool stuff. How to identify Yale closers. Some encyclopedic documents are here. If you work in locksmithing, well, I should say if you're relatively new to it, I would very much suggest that you review the cylinders and keying manual. It is a very helpful document when it comes to explaining the SKCS, the standard key coding system. It is a industry standardized way, actually invented by people at Russwin in the mid-20th century, a sister company to Yale. It'd be Corbin Russwin now. But the standard key coding system allows us all to speak the same language when it comes to how we call cylinders, etc. So a really great document. Key mark if you want to talk about restricted material. Parts manual for exit devices and mortise locks. Now, let's wrap up this video on camera. Okay, I'm a fan of Yale, and it's because while I do like the quality of their products, I would not necessarily say they're the best mortise lock in the world. There'd be no reason to say, there would be no reason for me to say that they're not either. But from my perspective, enjoying working with Yale is because of the other components that they bring to the relationship from manufacturer to distributor. And that namely is the ability to support the product from a technical support perspective, being able to answer questions, being able to get resolution, being able to do a deep dive into certain components and aspects of the entire line, which literally goes back over 150 years. Literally. As a result of that, they have countless keyways, dozens of keyways, dozens of evolutions of locks. And it's nice dealing with, and you know, in all the American lock manufacturers, Sargent, Corbin, Russwin, which was P.F. Corbin and Russell and Irwin, Sargent, Corbin, Russwin, Yale, Schlage, Best, Arrow, Falcon. These companies have been American lock manufacturers for decades, so they all go back. Just happens to be, though, that Yale, Linus Yale Jr., is the person who patented the modern pin tumbler cylinder. And while he didn't invent the idea, the Egyptians did 4,000 years ago, we can thank Linus Yale Jr. for the pin tumbler cylinder that we all use every single day of our lives. And it's nice working with Yale because their lineage goes literally back to that day. And Linus Yale Jr.'s father, Linus Yale Sr., was a lock maker of high regard himself. He focused on vaults, bank applications, safes, things of that nature, and that's how Jr. got his start. And he took some of his father's concepts and developed them. The only unfortunate thing about Jr. is that he didn't live that much longer. He got in business with Town, Henrytown, or Harrytown, H-Town, but he didn't live very long, unfortunately. Who knows what else he would have come up with. So I enjoy the product line because I enjoy how deep and rich it is as well. And I do like their catalog because it's laid out reasonably well. Maybe not the best in the industry, but better than many. Anyway, if you have any questions on the Yale 8800 series platform, Mortise Lock, or any of its derivatives, please feel free to reach out to us. We'd be happy to work with you on that. Thank you. Again, thank you for watching, and if you've enjoyed this video, please click thumbs up. Please subscribe and maybe even send the video to someone that you know. Thank you.